I'll break your arm and leave you disabled, my brother-in-law screamed as he threw a pair of MMA gloves at my face. My husband stood only a few feet away. He didn't protect me. He didn't even speak. He simply folded his arms and watched. Everyone in that room believed I was just another helpless woman they could bully. None of them knew that with a single phone call, I could destroy everything they had spent decades building. They had no idea who my father really was. And before the week was over, they would wish they had never learned my name. I'll break your arm and leave you disabled. The words exploded through the living room like a gunshot. Before I could react, a pair of black MMA gloves slammed into my chest. They fell to the floor. Standing over me was my brother-in-law, Derek Sullivan, a 6'3" amateur MMA fighter whose greatest talent wasn't fighting, it was terrifying people. His face burned with rage. "You think you're too good for this family?" he snarled. "Put the gloves on. Today you'll learn respect." I instinctively stepped backward. "I don't fight," I whispered. He laughed. "No, you just cry." The room erupted with laughter. Then I looked toward the one person who should have protected me. My husband. Ryan. He stood against the kitchen counter, arms folded, staring at his phone as though none of this mattered. Not one word. Not one step toward me. Nothing. That silence hurt far more than Derek's threats. Derek shoved me hard. I stumbled and crashed onto the carpet. My elbow struck the coffee table. Pain shot through my arm. He leaned over me, his face only inches away. "If you scream, I'll make sure you never use this arm again." His voice was calm now. That terrified me even more. My mother-in-law walked into the room carrying tea. She looked at me on the floor. And simply sighed. "Oh, Derek," she said casually. "Don't leave bruises where people can see them." Everyone laughed. Again. In that moment, I realized I wasn't part of this family. I was entertainment. For nearly 2 years I had tolerated their insults. They mocked my clothes. They mocked my career. They mocked my quiet personality. But today, they had crossed a line. Ryan finally looked up from his phone. For 1 second I thought he would help me. Instead he smiled at his brother. "Don't hurt her too much." The room burst into laughter. Something inside me broke. I slowly stood. Straightened my sweater. Picked up the MMA gloves. Everyone expected me to cry. Instead, I placed the gloves back into Derek's hands. Then I smiled. It wasn't the smile of someone He laughed so hard he nearly dropped the gloves. Ryan rolled his eyes. My mother-in-law shook her head. None of them understood. Because none of them knew one simple truth. For 5 years, I had hidden my real identity. Not because I was ashamed. Because my father had warned me. If anyone ever loves you because of my name instead of your heart, walk away. So I never told Ryan. Never told his family. Never told anyone. But tonight, for the first time, I reached into my purse, pulled out my phone, and scrolled to a contact I hadn't called in over 3 years. Dad. My finger hovered over the call button. One phone call could destroy the Sullivan family forever. I took a deep breath and pressed call. The phone rang once. Twice. 3 times. I almost hung up. Then a calm, familiar voice answered. "Emily?" Tears filled my eyes. "Hi, Dad." Silence. He hadn't heard my voice in over 3 years. "I wasn't expecting your call," he said gently. "Are you all right?" I looked through the living room window. Inside, Derek was laughing with Ryan while the rest of the family celebrated as if nothing had happened. My bruised elbow throbbed. "No," I whispered. "I'm not." My father didn't ask another question. Instead, he spoke the sentence that had protected me my entire life. "Tell me where you are." An hour later, I sat alone in my bedroom. Ryan finally walked in. "You embarrassed everyone tonight," he said coldly. I stared at him in disbelief. "I embarrassed them?" "You provoked Derek. He threatened to break my arm." Ryan shrugged. "You know how he is." Those 5 words shattered whatever love remained in my heart. "You actually believe I deserved it?" He sighed impatiently. "Why can't you just keep the peace?" I looked at the man I had married. For 2 years I had defended him. Made excuses for him. Believed he would eventually choose me over his family. Tonight I understood the truth. He never would. Quietly, I removed my wedding ring. Placed it on the bedside table. Ryan laughed. "Oh, stop being dramatic. You'll calm down tomorrow." I smiled sadly. "No. You'll understand tomorrow." The next morning, black luxury SUVs stopped outside the Sullivan house. One. Then another. Then a third. Neighbors began peeking through their curtains. Derek stepped outside carrying a cup of coffee. "What the hell is this?" The doors opened. Several men in tailored black suits stepped out. Not bodyguards. Executives. They ignored everyone, sharp blue eyes. An unmistakable aura of authority. My father. The billionaire businessman whose name appeared on skyscrapers, hospitals, and universities across the country. The man whose identity I had hidden from everyone. He walked straight toward me. His eyes stopped on the bruise forming on my arm. His expression changed. Not with anger. With disappointment. He gently touched my injured elbow. "Did they do this?" I nodded. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he turned toward the Sullivan family. Derek suddenly wasn't smiling anymore. Ryan looked completely confused. My mother-in-law whispered. Who is he?" My father looked directly at Derek. "You threatened my daughter." Derek forced a laugh. "Listen, old man." Before he could finish, one of the executives handed my father a thick folder. My father opened it without taking his eyes off Derek. "In the last 12 hours, he said calmly, I've learned everything about your family." He closed the folder. "And by this time next week, you'll wish you had never met my daughter." For the first time in his life, Derek had nothing to say. The Sullivan family stood frozen. No one dared speak. My father adjusted his suit jacket and looked at me. "Emily. Pack your things. You're coming home." Ryan finally found his voice. "Wait. Emily, what's going on?" I looked at him without emotion. "You wanted me to keep the peace. I'm done sacrificing myself for yours." He grabbed my wrist. "Don't leave." Before I could respond, one of my father's security officers stepped between us. "Sir, don't touch Miss Harrington." Ryan slowly let go. His face had turned pale. "Harrington?" My father looked directly at him. "You didn't even know your wife's real surname." Ryan's mouth fell open. "What?" My father continued calmly. "Emily never wanted to be loved because of my wealth. So she left our family name behind. She wanted someone to love her for who she was." He paused. "You failed that test." Ryan lowered his eyes. For the first time, he looked ashamed. But it was far too late. Within an hour, I had packed a single suitcase. I walked out of the house without looking back. As the convoy drove away, Derek shouted after us. "You think money scares me? This isn't over." My father didn't even turn around. He simply said to his assistant, "Start." The assistant nodded. "Yes, sir." The next morning, Derek arrived at his gym. The doors were locked. A notice was taped to the entrance. Least, his biggest sponsor cancelled. His equipment supplier demanded immediate payment. A planned tournament withdrew its invitation. Everything that had seemed secure only a day earlier was slipping away. Ryan's problems began before lunch. He walked into his office expecting a normal workday. Instead, his manager was waiting. "We've lost our largest client." "What does that have to do with me?" "The client specifically requested that you be removed from the account." "Why?" The manager hesitated. "They said your conduct doesn't reflect the values they expect from their business partners." Ryan stared in disbelief. An hour later, he was handed a termination letter. That evening, the Sullivan family gathered around the dining table. No one touched their food. Derek slammed his fist onto the table. "This is Emily's father's doing." His mother looked terrified. "Who is this man?" Ryan quietly searched the internet. His hands began shaking. News articles. Business magazines. Television interviews. There was my father. Chairman of one of the country's most influential business groups. A respected philanthropist. A man known for helping communities, and for refusing to tolerate intimidation or abuse. Ryan swallowed hard. He whispered, "Oh, my God." His mother leaned over his shoulder. When she saw the screen, the color drained from her face. This can't be real." Derek snatched the phone. He stared at the headline. Then, for the first time since I'd met him, the fearless bully looked frightened. Because he finally understood the truth. He had never been fighting a helpless woman. He had declared war on a family far more powerful than he had ever imagined. And the battle had only just begun. For the first time in his life, Derek was afraid. His fists had always solved his problems. But money, influence, and the truth were opponents he couldn't punch. 3 days later, Ryan appeared outside my father's estate. His expensive suit was wrinkled. His eyes were red from sleepless nights. He begged the security guard, "Please, tell Emily I just want 5 minutes." The guard made a phone call. A minute later, he returned. Miss Harrington said no. Ryan refused to leave. He waited outside the gates for 6 hours. Finally, I stepped out. He rushed toward me. "Emily, please. I made a mistake. I was under pressure from my family." I looked at him calmly. "No, Ryan. You weren't under pressure. You made a choice. You chose silence while your brother threatened your wife." He lowered his head. Even the gym where he trained refused to let him in. People had seen the security footage from that night. A neighbor's camera had recorded him threatening me outside the house. The video spread quickly. His reputation was destroyed. A week later, a legal notice arrived at the Sullivan home. Not from my father. From me. I had filed for divorce. And I had also reported Derek's assault and threats to the authorities. The evidence was undeniable. Witnesses. Medical records. Security footage. For the first time, Derek couldn't bully his way out. The courtroom was silent. The judge looked at Derek. "You threatened serious physical harm. You assaulted your sister-in-law. Do you deny it?" Derek looked toward Ryan. Toward his parents. No one spoke. No one defended him. The same family that had laughed while I suffered now sat in complete silence. The judge delivered the verdict. Derek was found guilty of assault and criminal intimidation. He received a prison sentence and was ordered to complete anger management counseling after his release. As officers escorted him away, he turned toward me. "I'm sorry." The words were barely audible. For the first time, they sounded genuine. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I simply nodded. Justice had spoken. I no longer needed revenge. Outside the courthouse, my father stood beside me. He placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "You've done the hardest thing." "What?" "You chose justice over hatred." I looked at the courthouse one last time. The chapter of fear in my life had finally ended. But a new beginning was waiting just ahead. 3 months passed. For the first time in years, I slept without fear. I laughed without pretending. I lived without asking permission. The divorce was finalized. The judge looked at Ryan one last time before signing the papers. "This marriage ended the day you failed to protect your wife." The sound of the judge's stamp echoed rough the courtroom. It was over. Ryan's life continued to unravel. After losing his job, every interview ended the same way. "We'll call you." No one ever did. The story of how he stood silently while his wife was threatened had spread through professional circles. His reputation wasn't ruined by lies, it was ruined by his own choices. One rainy afternoon, he sat alone in a small apartment. The large family home had been sold to pay debts. His phone rarely rang anymore. He opened an old photo album. There we were on our wedding day. I was smiling with hope. He was smiling. One letter was addressed to me. It read, "Emily, I spent years believing strength meant making others afraid. Now I know real strength is protecting people, not hurting them. I don't expect forgiveness. I only hope I never become that man again." I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. Forgiveness didn't erase the past. But hatred no longer controlled my future. A few weeks later, my father invited me to join him at the foundation he had built decades earlier. "Help people who can't defend themselves," he said. "Turn your pain into someone else's protection." I accepted. Together, we created a legal assistance program for victims of domestic abuse and family violence. Every week, I met women who believed they had no way out. I looked them in the eyes and said, "You are stronger than you think." Because once, someone had needed to tell me the same words. As I stood at the opening ceremony of our new center, reporters asked, "Miss Harrington, after everything that happened, do you still believe in justice?" I smiled. Yes. Because justice isn't about destroying lives. It's about making sure no one else has to live in fear. The cameras flashed. But for the first time, I wasn't hiding from them. I was finally living my own story. 1 year later, the grand ballroom of the Harrington Foundation was filled with judges, business leaders, journalists, and hundreds of guests. Above the stage, a large banner read, "Courage changes lives." Tonight wasn't about wealth. It wasn't about power. It was about hope. As I stood backstage, my father smiled proudly. "A year ago, you walked into my home carrying only one suitcase. Today, you've helped thousands of people find the courage to leave abusive homes." I smiled. "You taught me that real strength isn't inherited. It's earned." He hugged me tightly. I've never been prouder. When my name was announced, the audience rose to their feet. The applause echoed through the hall. I walked to the podium. For a moment, I looked across the crowd. Then I noticed a familiar face near the back. Ryan. He wasn't dressed in an expensive suit anymore. He wasn't surrounded by friends. He stood alone, quietly listening. I began my speech. "A year ago, I believed losing my marriage meant losing my future. I was wrong. Sometimes the people who betray you don't destroy your life. They reveal the life you were meant to live." The audience applauded. I continued. Revenge isn't watching someone suffer. It's refusing to let their cruelty define your future. The day I stopped trying to prove my worth to people who never valued me was the day I truly became free. Many people. Then I smiled gently. "I believe you're sorry." His eyes brightened with hope. "But forgiveness? doesn't always mean a second chance. I've forgiven you. But I've also chosen a different future. He nodded. A single tear rolled down his face. I understand. For the first time, he accepted the consequences of his choices. He turned and walked away. Not defeated. Just finally honest. As I stepped outside, the evening sky glowed with the colors of sunset. My father joined me. Do you still want revenge? He asked. I looked at the people leaving the event, women who had rebuilt their lives, children who were finally safe, families filled with hope. I smiled. No. I already have everything they could never take from me. My peace. My father smiled proudly. That's the greatest victory of all. I looked toward the horizon. The scars of my past would always remain. But they no longer reminded me of pain. They reminded me of survival. Of courage. And of the woman I had become. Because in the end, the greatest revenge wasn't destroying the people who hurt me. It was building a life so beautiful that they could never be part of it again. The end.